Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Golf and Politics. Today we're going to have a special segment. We're recording this on February the 12th. So if we release this next week, a lot may happen between now and next week. I mean, there's a lot that's happened in the first 3 weeks of Trump 2.0. And Jordan, why don't you go ahead and roll the clip for us here?
The tradition of Festivus begins with the airing of grievances. I got a lot of problems with you people. Now you're going to hear about it.
All right. So this isn't Festivus, but this is Rob's airing of grievances. And I don't think he has problems with lots of people. I think he has problems with one person. And so one thing that Rob has told me from day one, he said, look, I am not going to be Alan Colmes to your Sean Hannity. That's just not who I am. And I respect that. And he has got his opinions and he is free to come on. Rob, I just want to say the floor is yours to air your grievances. And then I'll try to pitch in my opinions to fight back a little bit. But, you know, why are you so pissed off at Donald Trump after 3 weeks?
It's not so much pissed off as it is just annoyed. I mean, it's kind of like right as you're trying to take a nap and your neighbor's car alarm goes off across the street. That's what the Trumpism is to me. It's not so much that I sit around stewing in anger. I expected a lot of what he's done, and it doesn't, ruin my day so much, but there are certain things that do get under my skin. The interesting thing about Donald Trump is that if any other politician, and I'm including J.D. Vance or Barack Obama, did or said half of the things Donald Trump gets away with, the entire world would stop and everybody would laser focus on that. But with Donald Trump, it's like the difference between stepping on a nail or stepping on a bed of nails, because the ridiculous statements and the corruption and, outlandish behavior is so frequent. It's almost like he gets away with it because it's done right in front of your face. And there's so much of it that it's hard to keep track of it. I, of course, have kept a list. I took notes for this show of some of the things that really bother me the most. I'll start really with a catch-all at the top. And this is basically a cross MAGA, where they keep talking about real America and real Americans. And as somebody that spent 20 years of my life, exactly half of my life, living in rural Ohio, and 20 years of it living in Washington, D.C., I'm always really bothered by statements like that, because I've met wonderful people who are still my friends and family in the Midwest. And I've met some incredible people here in Washington, D.C., all of whom, by the way, are from somewhere else. A lot of them are from the South. They're from the Midwest. And they're good people. And they came here to serve, or they came here because they wanted to live in a city where there were more opportunities or what have you. But I just always am bothered by the default American, the default real American position being somebody that lives in Tulsa and has a certain, checks all the boxes, white, male, Christian, conservative, lives in the South, etc. And that's no knock on you. But when you say real American, it makes it seem like we're less than, that we're less.
Well, can I push back a little bit here?
Yeah.
And I know I said the floor is yours, but I need to be able to just push back. You're saying that the real American talk is white Christian male. Yet I don't understand why that just continues to be your party's play here. I mean, I'm just
It's
perfect
somewhat
example.
fair.
Like, if Trump is such a racist and misogynist and only is one putting white Christian males in positions of power, then why did he appoint Scott Bessent to the Treasury Department? Why did he appoint Pam Bondi to the DOJ to be the Attorney General? Lori Chavez DeRemer, like, you can go on and on.
They're all sycophants and stooges.
Oh my goodness.
Who has been called. This is the Rob Ellsworth
All right, I'll let you get back to your airing of grievances, but I'm pushing back on that position.
There is no one better at grievance and bitching and whining politics than Donald John Trump and his followers. Oh, these media elites and these New York City
Fake
and
news. Fake news.
DC elites, they look down on us. They do all these things. I'm not giving you the Democratic Party play. Fuck the Democratic Party. I'm giving you my personal take.
All right, I'll let you have the floor back.
Republicans going back to Lee Atwater are phenomenal. And I used to be a Republican at phrases and buzzwords that elicit exactly the emotion they want without saying what they really mean. For example, San Francisco values. That means gay in Republican lingo. Oh, she has San Francisco values. Or now it means homeless blacks. New York values traditionally means Jewish or gay. And the one thing Donald Trump did in the 2015 Republican primary that I loved and I appreciated was when Ted Cruz pulled the Donald Trump has New York City values bit. Donald Trump came right back with a fucking haymaker. And he looked Ted Cruz in the eye and he said, I'll tell you what New York values are. New York values are all the people on 9/11 that rebuilt from the rubble, that rallied around the firefighters and the police, that rebuilt a city, that stood and were a symbol to the world of freedom and hard work and sticking together. New York City values to me are immigrants that come from all over the world and open a little restaurant in Chinatown or Little Italy. They're people that move there for a dream to either get rich or famous or to do whatever else. But a lot of the people that live there, there are real New Yorkers who have their own charm and grit and character that I love and appreciate of all backgrounds. And then there are the people from all over the world that move there, searching for a dream, coming there, whether than coming for the first time. So when I hear New York City values or San Francisco values, it's a slight. And then you know exactly what they mean.
It's a slight that those cities are so poorly run that we don't want the rest of the country to look like San Francisco and New York.
No.
That's exactly what it is.
No, we're still on the Rob airing of the grievances.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
We all know that those are loaded phrases. And the same thing that's loaded is with DEI. I don't support quotas. I don't support hiring somebody just because they're black or whatever else. They have to meet certain criteria. That's always been the case. You don't get to become a pilot or an air traffic controller or head of the fire department unless you've worked your way through the ranks. And when that plane crashed into the military chopper into the Potomac, that's a mile from where I live. It's a driver and a sand wedge from where I work. I land in that airport over 100 times a year and have done so for 20 years. It was personal. And the president had an opportunity to come out and say, just say, we're grieving for the families. This is going to be under investigation. We'll wait to see what happened and we'll comment on it at a later time. But in the meantime, God bless their families and we wish them well. That's not what he fucking did. He didn't have the decency to do that. He came out and made it about DEI. He blamed the military first, and then he insinuated about the pilots, all of whom are highly qualified, flight trained, meet all the rigorous standards and criteria. But he had to make the DEI catch-all something that I think offended the families. One of the pilots' parents decided to try to keep her identity private so that she wouldn't be harassed online, that they wouldn't be harassed online, instead of grieving their daughter who was an exemplary active duty service member who had met all the criteria. So those are examples that I just think, it just diminishes the office and it diminishes the people who lost their lives. It's one thing to come in and say, we're going to shake things up. We're going to shake up policy. We're going to change this criteria or that without absolutely vilifying the people that took an oath, signed up to serve, love their job, work hard, and, know a lot about what they're doing and are qualified to do what they're doing. And the dickishness of Doge and everything else, like I'm fine cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. I'm fine changing policies. He won the election. But the manner in which they're doing it is so disgusting, and
Why? So let me push back on that and just simply ask, why is it disgusting to go in and take a sledgehammer to the bureaucratic state? Look, the bureaucratic state is not something that was ever set up in our Constitution. This is a modern invention, and so often it exists for the sake of existing and for the sake of jobs. That's why Washington, D.C. is always recession proof, right? Because the government just keeps, we have all these people doing all this work, which, what are they really doing at the
For
end of the day?
for
When you
two
start
for
looking at these waste, fraud, and brute, why not go
I
in with
hear
a
you. Wait,
sledgehammer?
it's not your show today. I hear you.
All right, all right.
The
I'm asking you a question.
well,
Why wouldn't you just go in with a sledgehammer and
I'm
start
about
and
to
build
answer.
it up from the ground up?
I'm
All right.
about to answer you, because you don't have to take a sledgehammer and dehumanize the people involved. You can change the policy and cut the budget without vilifying every single person that's in the federal workforce and lying. What they've said about USAID have been proven fact-checked lies. We didn't send $50 million worth of condoms to Hamas. It was part of a program uh, in multiple countries, mostly in Egypt and sub-Saharan Africa, to reduce the spread of HIV/AIDS. It's just simply not true. So you can go in and make an ideological argument against the bureaucratic state, but tell the truth. There's no need to make up lies. I'm sure there's plenty of fat to cut and people to fire based on legitimate policy discussions other than lying. And when it comes to unelected bureaucrats, first and foremost, this is such an old, tired Republican talking point. Um, Elon Musk and his little Doge thugs of 19 to 23-year-olds, um, of the 1923-year-olds, Big Balls, the one guy named Big Balls, was fired from his only internship for leaking classified material. Another one of them was recently fired from Doge for racist posts online about he couldn't pay him to marry outside of his ethnicity. He was fired, and then Trump and Vance are now pushing to have him rehired because they like that. They don't want anybody fired for saying anything that irresponsible. And so a lot of these agencies do great work, and we have a big, complicated country, Matt. We have a big, complicated country. Saying that our elected officials in Congress, you've met them, you've helped get a lot of them elected, you've helped them work. Do they have the time and ability to distribute Social Security benefits or disability benefits or food in sub-Saharan Africa? You have to hire
Well, of
administrators,
course we should, but it's
administrators,
gotten out of control,
big
hasn't it?
agencies. So that's number one. It's a big, complex country with 330 million people. The idea that members of Congress are going to pass the laws on their own, write the bills, read them themselves is fucking laughable, and then carry it out on the administrative side. Do we need 2.3 million federal employees? Probably not. There's plenty of room to cut. No doubt about it. I'm not going to fight that. I'm not going to fight disruption or cutting here or there or changing policies. Not fighting that at all. I'm fighting the blanket, all government is the devil, all of it's bad, because Elon Musk isn't fighting to cut the billions in contracts he gets for his companies, for Tesla and SpaceX and whatever else he owns. He's not fighting to cut those. He is fighting to fire the inspectors general that oversee the ethics rules for what he's doing and what his thugs are doing and what, you know, things he's already under investigation for, under review for. Okay. So there's that point. And then, on a broader level, I think that we lose track or we lose sight of the fact that saying Doge is reducing the deficit is a lie. It is a bait and switch, smoke and mirrors lie. How do we know this? Because even if they cut 100,000 there, millions there, maybe a couple billion here, are they really cutting it? Employees, there are 165,000 federal employees who matriculate every year that leave. 65,000 employees have accepted the president's buyout offer. We're just paying people who were already leaving to leave early, but they're still getting a full buyout attractive, right? So are we really cutting the federal workforce? One. Two, their savings plan in all of these agencies is so funny because 85% of every allocated dollar goes to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and defense. When you add vets and financing the debt or annual debt or debt servicing payments, you get up over 90%. Okay. The president and Elon Musk have taken those off the table. They've promised in their campaign. Now, they may go back on their promise, but they promised in their campaign that they were going to leave Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, defense, vets, and off the table. Okay. So if you do that, you would have to cut 85% of everything else, all the other agencies, Department of Energy, Justice, IRS, EPA, everything. You'd have to cut 85% of everything else just to get the budget in balance. If you don't cut taxes.
Right. Okay. So let me just pause for a second, because I actually believe we have some areas of agreement. We have our area of agreement is that waste, fraud, and abuse needs to be rooted out. And if there's problems in these agencies, you have no problem getting rid of them. You have no problem even with the philosophy of taking a hard approach on these things. Your problem is with Trump's style. Your problem's with Elon Musk's style. You think they're going in.
No, not alone. And
Not alone.
I was about to get to the money shot, and I know where
Okay.
you're going with this. Yes, his style and how they're doing it, I think, is illegal, corrupt, political grandstanding, if you will. My real problem with it, beyond just debasing everybody that signs up to serve, who are my friends, my neighbors, people I've worked with, people I've lobbied, who are real people, they're real Americans, damn it. They're real Americans. It's that it's not doing what it's stated to do, okay? When you are proposing a $5 trillion tax cut, when you are proposing a $2.5 trillion buildup of the military, border, and everything else, okay? He campaigned on those things. But you're expanding the hole by $7.5 trillion before you go try to waste, fraud, and abuse. The waste, fraud, and abuse they're cutting is bait and switch, smoke and mirrors chicken shit. It ain't the chicken salad. The chicken salad is the stuff he's taking off the table. So how do we know this? He's now pushing Republicans in private meetings to pass a 4-year raising of the debt ceiling by $10 trillion. Why 10 trillion? Because that's how much he thinks the national debt will increase over the next 4 years. Because of his tax cuts, because of the military and immigration buildup, and because he's not going to touch Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. So when Elon Musk runs around with his little torture chamber crew, terrorizing all these other agencies who do serve and have been put in place by law, with the authority of the Constitution, Congress has the ability to set this up, and the executive branch can run the executive branch within the law. Cutting U.S. aid, cutting $190 million from cancer research for pediatric cancer research. Why the fuck are we doing that? Cutting life-saving vaccines in sub-Saharan Africa because it makes MAGA people happy on Facebook. It's all just giving catnip to the base, but it's not doing a damn thing about the debt and deficit. That's going to go up 10 trillion. We know it because Trump wants to raise the debt ceiling by 10 trillion.
Okay,
Now-
so I need to push back on this because
There is no pushing.
there is.
It's true.
There is. So the reason that Trump needs to have the debt ceiling, the Republicans on board to raise the debt ceiling, is so that we're not held hostage by the far right of our party every time it comes time for a vote. And there are going to be things that cost money in order to keep our country safe. I also would push back that I agree with you that we are not going to get anywhere close to a balanced budget just cleaning up USAID and the Department of Education and HUD and whatever. That's not going to get us there. It's a principled thing that needs to happen, though, I would argue. I also don't believe, though, when he says he's not going to touch Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, and the Department of Defense, he's not saying that he's not going to go in and look for waste, fraud, and abuse in those programs.
Look,
he's already said he's sending Elon into the Department of Defense very soon.
I got your point. But what you're missing here is that the bait and switch on this is because they can't pass a lot of big laws through the House with no margin, he's signing 1 million executive orders a day, giving the appearance of hard work and absolute power and movement on all of his campaign pledges. Those are only really affecting the federal government. They're not laws, and they could be changed by the next Democrat who strolls
Sure.
in. So when you talk about cutting these cuts being necessary, okay, fine. Even if I cede that, what he's doing economically, picture a family living in a big McMansion, okay? Big McMansion, heavily leveraged. They got to cut back. What Trump is doing is essentially, in Doge, cutting out the daily Starbucks run, firing the cleaning lady, okay? And canceling the cable bill. Maybe those are fiscally prudent things to do, while at the same time building a new swimming pool and buying a new Lamborghini to put in the garage, because the tax cut and the swimming pool are,
Sure, but if you stop to think about what the economic impact of letting the Trump tax cuts expire, it would be terrible for our nation and for our economy.
Let me ask you a quick question. If we get to the end of this 4 years and the national debt increases from 34 trillion to 44 trillion, where it's projected to go, let's say it's 40 trillion, and Elon Musk cut out all the low-hanging fruit in these agencies, will it have been worth it? If overall, the big picture, the national debt is ballooning to a point where it's out of control. And I would argue, no, it's not. Because when you get to that point, what I think the long-term Project 2025, which is being implemented verbatim, page by page, as we speak, the real long-term conservative play here, and it's a smart one, is slash and burn all the agencies, all the things we hate. The bureaucrats who write rules that we don't like and assess fees that we don't like, fuck them, let's fire. We're going to get rid of PBS, and we're going to get rid of DEI. We're going to do all these things that make conservatives feel good and mass, to on TV at night. But they're not changing anything. So once they cut all this shit, let's say they cut 100% of it, okay? If you go forward with the tax cut and you go forward with the defense buildup, the national debt's going to eventually get to a point to where to service it, it's right now $1 trillion a year, which is more than our military budget, just to service the national debt. That number is going to get so high and our revenue is going to be so low that the only thing left to cut will be ding, 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 the social safety net. Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And maybe it's not Trump. Maybe it's the next Republican president or the next Democratic president that has no choice because we're going broke, right? So you can cut 100% of this Doge shit, 100%, and it won't make a dent. It just feels good. It won't make a dent. It's all partisan bullshit. It won't make a dent. If you're not addressing Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the tax code, and defense, you're lying about being fiscally conservative. And that's what this administration is doing to the American people, because the vast majority of voters in both parties don't know what I just said. And those are numbers that if I sat down and talked to the Treasury Secretary, he'd be like, yeah, I totally agree.
I think Trump would totally agree. I think everybody agrees that the entitlements have to be reformed in some capacity. It's just politically, how do you go about it is not easy for anybody. I'll cede that to you. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Like, if we don't address entitlement spending and figure out a way to get that under control, we can cut everything in these other agencies and it's not going to balance the budget. I also tend to believe that there's waste, fraud, and abuse going on at the Department of Defense. I think there are things being spent by our military that clearly aren't in our national interest and needed for the defense of our country. I think that there are people that are getting Social Security that are already dead and payments are still going out. I mean, Elon's already discovered that. We're seeing that a lot of the government retirement benefits are being stored in a limestone mine in Pennsylvania. Like, that's not efficient. We have plenty of waste, fraud, and abuse, I think, across all areas of government. We've never really dove into these things to find the real problems.
Matt, if there's $1 trillion of waste, fraud, and abuse, if there's $1 trillion, and the number's nowhere near that high, but let's say it's $1 trillion, cut it all. God bless you. Cut it all. You've done nothing to solve the problem. If you keep the taxes where they are in perpetuity, we're going to see a dwindling revenue source. I read every Ronald Reagan book and Milton Friedman book and University of Chicago book and George Mason economics book and Georgetown. Growing up, I was a young Alex P. Keaton, and I was taught that tax cuts pay for themselves. Well, we have found with every single freaking tax cut since 1981 that revenues shrink, debt increases. So unless you want to take entitlements and defense seriously, we can't afford the tax cut. If you're going to do the tax cut, then you've got to disrupt the social safety net. The math does not add up. So what they're going to do is what we've always done since 1981. We're going to cut the taxes. We're going to increase the defense and Pentagon, and then we're going to put the rest on the credit card. What Trump is doing differently is at least I've got to give the appearance of making cuts. So I'm going to send Eli and the boys and sick them in on all the things that my party hates. We're going to cut those things one by one. That's what he's doing. Now, put this in perspective. This is mind-blowing. This is an interesting stat. From 1789 to 1981, from George Washington to Jimmy Carter, the entire national debt of this country was just over $900 billion, under $1 trillion. From 1981 to present, from Ronald Reagan to Donald Trump and Democrats in between, the national debt has jumped from less than $1 trillion to about $35 trillion now. So $34 trillion of the $35 trillion debt started in 1981 when we went under the theory that deficits don't matter, that you can slash the taxes on corporations and people at the top as much as you want and spend as much as you want on everything else, put the rest on the credit card, and as long as GDP outpaces that growth, then you're okay. Well, it's the same economic argument as what got us in the housing crisis. Go ahead and take out a second mortgage on your house to build a pool and a pool house. And as long as home prices keep going up, who cares how much debt you have on the property? Until you have a housing crisis and home prices plummet, and now you're holding the bag on an upside down mortgage. That's where we're headed with the debt. And I know the debt and deficit only matter when Republicans are in charge, but when Democrats are in charge and you hit us. But the bottom line is we are heading there on our debt servicing payments. And so something has to give. Trump's not asking anything hard of anybody except some bureaucrats at USAID and the CFPB, many of whom were already planning to leave as they matriculate every year, as I said earlier. So he's not making any hard decisions. I just have...
Well, let me ask you this. So you didn't bring this up. I think it was 2 days ago. And I'll just straight up, I'm going to tell you that I am not an expert on tax law. And so I'm probably not as qualified to talk on this as maybe you are working with a lot of your clients. But Elon Musk came out and said that there are significant loopholes in the tax code that benefit billionaires, and we need to get rid of them to increase revenues to the government. Elon Musk came out and said this is part of the problem with the tax code. Now, if a billionaire like Elon Musk doesn't come out and say that, I mean, he says he's getting pitched on tax loopholes all the time, and he takes advantage of some of them. I'll be interested to see if this is an area that they go down with Doge and make recommendations when they are doing the tax bill to start eliminating some of these.
We'll see. I
loopholes.
mean,
And how does that change revenues in the country?
That's out of Doge's purview because Congress has to pass a law.
Right.
We'll see. That's a big we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm all for closing loopholes and deductions.
I am too. I'm for simplifying the tax code and I'm for common sense, right? I mean,
and the overall bill costs $5 trillion. The only place to really find those offsets on loopholes and deductions. And this is when we get, Bill Clinton always says, show me the specifics, which loopholes and which deductions, because the only ones that are big enough to make a dent in paying for this bill, making it closer to, or not increasing the deficit by as much as it's proposed to, are the home mortgage deduction and the marriage and child care credit deductions. If Republicans want to try to take those away, those are aimed at the middle and working class. That would be a massive tax increase
Right. We're not going to do that.
on the people who least need it. So the loopholes and deductions he's talking about are like the carried interest deduction, which everyone I think can agree is ridiculous because it's just helping Wall Street traders and analysts maximize their quarterly bonuses. Most Republicans will tell you that the carried loophole deduction is ridiculous, but they have a powerful lobby, and every time they tried to pull it, even Chuck Schumer has protected them because they're his constituency, and other Republicans who are tight with the banks protect it, and But even if you get rid of the carried interest deduction, which I think is what Elon is referencing, with pennies on the dollar compared to the bigger deal. So what I'm saying is, if you want to get the deficit on a sustainable path, the only way to do it are the most painful of choices.
Sure.
And I don't see, in fairness, either party willing to make those decisions. I'm more conservative than I think you or Donald Trump are on the actual long-term trajectory. I'm way more conservative than my party when it comes to the painful decisions that need to be made.
No, I'm with you. Look, it's kind of funny because our governor in Oklahoma just came out with he wants to start Doge in Oklahoma, which is just a joke. Like, I mean, this is a governor that 6 of the budgets while he's been in office, he hasn't even signed. So they've gone into law without him signing the budget. The Oklahoma legislature has one constitutional requirement, and that is to pass a balanced budget every year. They have to do that every year. And so we have a balanced budget in Oklahoma. We have billions of dollars in a rainy day fund. And he's acting like, he needs to have Doge out there finding these, this waste, fraud, abuse. Well, we have a balanced budget. Like, things are actually on pretty good footing. Yes, we would like to cut income taxes and get to a 0 income tax in our state, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Well,
I don't understand why we ever got into this problem in the first place in our country. Why did we ever think spending money that we don't have? Why did we ever think that was okay to do? I mean, that's where I'm always befuddled by it.
Art Laffer with the Laffer curve.
Mm-hmm.
There's an economic curve where you can see if you cut taxes, revenue will increase. And he based it off the Kennedy-Johnson tax cuts, where they cut taxes in the 1960s and revenues increased. But there's a key difference between then and today. Do you know what the top marginal tax rate was when Dwight Eisenhower left office?
It was 90%, wasn't it? It was
90,
ridiculous.
90%. And Johnson, in the Kennedy Memorial Tax Package, cut it from 90% down to like 71, okay? And then Nixon and Ford didn't really make any big changes. And then Reagan cut the top rate from around 70% down to 29%. And the deficit grew so much. What conservatives don't often remember is that over his 8 years, over the 7 years after he passed his big tax cut, he had to raise taxes 8 times because they were so imbalanced. It was starting to affect the country. Now, here are a few things to keep in mind about the states. One, states like Oklahoma are able to balance budgets because, one, it's constitutionally mandated that they do it. And two, they accept billions and billions and billions of dollars in transfer payments from the federal government for healthcare, roads and bridges, education, a whole host of things. So if Washington cuts off that spigot to Oklahoma, can't issue their own currency They can do certain bonds to issue debt, but they have to be in balance. So if Washington cuts off the spigot to all these red state governors who pat themselves on the back for balancing the budget, they've got to find billions in shortfalls. So either they cut all those state programs and don't offer them at all, or they raise taxes.
Right.
So that's the reality on
Oh,
this.
sure.
On this
And what I was saying was more just pie in the sky. Like, wish we could go back in time to where, look, if you have theory is theory, and if theory is we're going to cut taxes and then revenues are going to increase, okay, and that doesn't happen. Well, you dip into one-time if you're a government that's acting responsibly, you dip into your one-time savings account and you adjust for the next year, which means either raising revenues or cutting some spending. And we've just been unable to make these tough decisions as a country, I believe, for decades and decades.
We can't figure out the maximum or minimum tax rate that brings in the revenue the government needs to stabilize itself without harming the economy. We all have our theory of that, because part of stabilizing the deficit, is we still need to have an economy that grows
That's right.
at 3 to 4% a year. So you can't just tax your way out of it, and you
That's right.
can't just slash spending your way out of it, because if you cut off all the spigot, that's going to hurt the economy too, because
That's right.
GDP is consumer spending, business spending, and government spending, right? So where we went wrong in the early 80s is that it became the view that deficits don't matter as long as GDP outpaces it. If you cut the taxes, revenue will grow. Well, revenue would grow when the top marginal tax rate was 70% and you was 90 and you cut it to 70, but it's not necessarily going to grow when you cut it from 70 all the way down to 29. You're going to see a decrease. Now, add on top of that the Swiss cheese nature of our tax code for every special interest imaginable that don't go to poor people, by the way. These are things that I don't care what the top marginal tax rate is. I pay the top marginal tax rate, 37%, 38%, whatever it's been since Trump was there in 2017. Biden didn't touch the tax code in 4 years. So 37% there, 10% and change to the District of Columbia. It's not actually what you pay, because after you go through expenses, loopholes, deductions, everything else, what matters is the effective tax rate. And what most rich people will tell you, and what most corporations will tell you, is yeah, they'd like a lower rate, but what's more important to them is predictability. So they want to know what the tax rate is for 5 years, for 10 years. Let
Right.
us know what it is and quit doing this, because no businessman can make a big decision or investment with capital expenditures without predictability, knowing
right.
what your employment costs are, your tax costs are, all your other expenditures. And that's what gets lost in this back and forth debate. And, you know, another key stat, I love key stats, you can look them all up, because I did. The national debt quadrupled under the 12 years of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, and it doubled in the 8 years after Bill Clinton left office. So it quadrupled in the 12 years before Bill Clinton and doubled in the 8 years after him. And he was the last president to balance budgets. Now, I know what you're going to say. He cut deals with Republicans. Of course he did. That's what presidents should do. He cut
Right.
deals
And
with...
look, and I
Important.
won't argue with that. I mean, I think that I think there's something to be said that if the Democrats want to win the midterms and the Democrats want to win the White House back in 2028, they need a Bill Clinton type of politician
Totally.
that's going to win. Like the people leading the Democratic Party right now, it's like I want to send them money so they can continue doing their
As a
bullhorn rallies.
As a Democrat, I have an honest question. Who is leading my party right now?
Right. Yeah, I get it. And that's I think that's an issue.
We're in the same spot. Look, it's hard to tell where we are, right? If you look historically, politically. Is this 1981 where Republicans are setting themselves up for a generation. Or is it 1989 where Trump finishes his term and JD Vance loses? Or what I think is probably the most apt comparison, this feels like 2005 to me. And I was a Republican in 2005 on Capitol Hill. Democrats were out to pasture. George W. Bush just got reelected. We hated the guy. They hated the guy. I voted for him. Republicans took control of the Senate and the House. Karl Rove was talking about a permanent Republican majority. Everything is turning up red. Everything's turning up Republican. And then about a year in, Hurricane Katrina hit. Iraq was a mess. People got fed up with Bush. Gas prices went through the roof. The Democratic Party was on the sidelines.
Yep.
You know, we had no leaders. We had no national spokesman. And just 2 years later, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House. 2 years after that, Barack Obama is President of the United States. And then Democrats thought we had the audacity to think.
And nobody would have ever predicted Barack Obama becoming president of the United States, right? It was not his turn to be president.
So I'm not worried about where Democrats are right now. A leader will eventually take hold. Somebody's message will eventually grasp our attention. And leaders lead people and lead their own party to new variations of old positions or to new positions altogether. I mean, Donald Trump's Republican Party is totally different than the Republican Party most people in Steubenville grew up voting against.
That's right.
You know, or Republicans were the free trade, Wall Street, country club, elite party. And now Republicans are billing themselves as the party of the working class. And
Bob Ney was ahead of his time, Rob.
yeah. No, honestly, yeah. But so what I'm saying is I don't hit the panic button because I know someone's going to step up and meet the moment. Like, we're past the Clinton era. It's not the 90s anymore.
Sure.
We're past the Obama era. He had his time and he was great. And I love the guy. I hope he's a guest on our show.
I do too.
But a new Democratic leader needs to step up and define for the party what our values mean in policy terms and what our message is for 2026 and 2028. And it never happens within the first 3 weeks of a new president.
Right. That's right.
We're licking our wounds. The president and the Republicans are in the honeymoon phase that happens for everybody after they win their election and take office. It's put up or shut up time. If Donald Trump does everything he said he would do, and it works, and people attribute and feel better about the country and meaning themselves, because the most important economy in the world is your own for voters, then Donald Trump will win in the midterms and JD Vance will win in 4 years. If you guys do a great job and it works and people feel it.
I agree. Chris LaCivita was he co-managed the campaign with Susie Wiles. He was on an interview on a podcast I listened to the other day. It was really insightful. He said, look, one thing that President Trump understands is that his voters are not his. You're always renting the voters, if you will, right? I mean, there's a job to do. And if Trump does, if I was advising the Democrats, and I'm sure you're advising some people to say, back off the panic button a little bit. I think you have so much panic 3 weeks in. It's like, let this guy govern. Because if Trump does not govern, if Trump does not deliver on the things that he says that he was going to do, the Republicans will lose miserably in the midterms, and we will lose 4 years from now. And you're right, somebody will emerge. But having Maxine Waters lead fights on, at USAID and Chuck Schumer with the bullhorn, and that's not helping. That's not helping your cause at all.
They're all. I tell clients, and I think you probably tell campaign people this too. They're finding their footing.
Yeah.
Is an issue something we're going to be talking about a year from now, 2 years from now? That's what I pay attention to. I don't care. I mean, I could get worked up about the Gulf of America. If it was really the Gulf of America, the Air Force One pilot wouldn't have announced it by saying, we're now flying into international waters over the Gulf of America. If it was the Gulf of America, it wouldn't be international waters. That was on the plane, right? So Donald Trump said the other day, by the way, I think the Gulf of America is the geographical version of freedom fries.
Oh yeah, there's no question.
I mean, it's
Let's get politics.
It's jingoistic, it's xenophobic, it's all the best stuff all in one fucking package. It's a joke. But anyways, I don't really care about that. I focus on the things, is this issue or is this scandal or is this thing something that's going to matter next month, next year, 3 years from now? Then I laser in on it and I care about it when looking into the future. The daily scandal, Chuck Schumer with a bullhorn, no one's gonna give a shit.
No, for sure.
2 days from now. So another point I'd like to make on that front, put your campaign hat on. Let's say I'm a moderate. There you go. There you go. I'll put on my from politics. But let's say I am a moderate Republican in Oklahoma. I'm a military veteran, successful CEO, wealthy, beautiful wife, perfect kids. But my posture on this is, let's get the budget in line. Let's really do it. And if I propose saying we're going to get rid of loopholes and deductions, including the mortgage deduction and the child deduction, because we can't afford it. And I recommend that the tax cuts may be too big. It could be inflationary. It could explode the deficit. Let's take a more pared down approach. I'm conservative. I'm supporting a tax cut. I'm talking about getting the balanced budget in line. What would your campaign ads be in our primary if you have a real MAGA conservative?
This man's a liberal.
Yeah, exactly.
He stands with the Democrats in a way of cutting your taxes. I mean, it's easy, and I get it. Look, it's
that's the hard part.
All policy follows politics, and right now the politics are swinging in this direction. Trump has capitalized on that, in my opinion. I like this segment. I think we'll do it more often. I think we need to have more of these kind of segments. And I made some notes of areas I thought you might go on your airing of grievances. And I think you'll probably have more to air as 4 years go on. But I think this was actually productive. And actually, believe it or not, Rob, I think there's some things that we actually agree on fundamentally. But I totally understand where you're coming. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. And I think that if your party could find a way to posture in that direction on substance, you're going to see you could see a very competitive midterm. But we'll see how that plays out.
If I were running to lead the party or be our nominee, I would take the Bill Clinton triangulation approach. I would put the pesky, annoying issues, even if I agree with them, to the sidelines, and I would hit Republicans where they're perceived to be strong. I would hit them on the deficit and the debt and inflation. And Donald Trump said in his interview last week that he won for two reasons. I think there were more reasons, but that he won because prices were too high and because Biden let the border get out of control. There were a lot of people who traditionally vote for Democrats who gave Trump the benefit of the doubt because of those two issues. They didn't give him sign off on all this other stuff. So Trump's got to be careful in that. He took 49.9% of the popular vote, which was a good turnout for him. And he won all the swing states. But those are soft coalitions. And so if he wants to keep those specific voters, it's going to have to be more than Gulf of America. It's going to have to be more than Doge. They're going to have to feel real.
No question. No doubt about that. I think
Um,
Donald Trump would tell you that himself, or at least his top aides would. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Like, while it was a clear mandate at the ballot box in November, it is at best rented, and you have to deliver on results. If you don't deliver on results, you're going to get voted out. And so we're only 3 weeks in. We'll see where we're at, 3 months in and a year in, and see where the poll numbers are at then.
and we'll see. And if you guys do a great job and people feel it, you'll win. So I only have 3 more quick grievances. And then
Okay.
I'll try to say something nice.
Yeah, Jordan
Um,
has told us that I have to say something bad about Trump, and you have to say something good about Trump before
Okay.
we end this.
Um, okay. So one area that is not quite yet a grievance, but based on an interview I watched with JD Vance on a podcast from a couple years ago and recent tweets and comments from Trump himself, I am concerned, yet not yet pulling the fire alarm of a potential constitutional crisis regarding
Oh, there's the hot button
court decision.
Democrat talking point right now. Constitutional crisis. It's
Yeah.
on every.
Yeah, well, and it will be effective if he does it, because presidents have always accepted the rulings of the courts, and so with the exception,
Really, Joe Biden accepted the student loan ruling when he said
Yeah.
we're going to find ways around it.
yeah, and Trump is
Yeah.
welcome. Look, Trump is welcome to appeal rulings. He is welcome to rework executive orders and try to stay within. So you
Rob,
have
let me just say this though. Let's be honest. They court shop these things, right? I mean, and both parties do it. At the end of the day, there's a reason that a court in Rhode Island is ruling on how the president can run the executive branch. It's because it's a judge that's friendly to the
and
Democratic cause.
just like you'll court shop getting rid of gay marriage in front of a conservative judge and putting it up to the state of
I'm not arguing that
state
both
of-
parties don't do
state
it,
of
but this
Pennsylvania.
is awfully egregious. Like,
Look, conservatives did it on abortion, court shopping. Look, there's court shopping, but at the end of the day, it comes to the Supreme Court. I do not have faith in this Supreme Court to limit this president's power. You might. I don't. So I genuinely do fear that. And I would give him and JD Vance the benefit of the doubt if it wasn't for January 6th and it wasn't for calling fake electors and everything that was going on in Georgia with trying to find an extra 1,185 votes. If he didn't pull that stunt with the Stop the Steal lies and trying to stay in power and disrupt congressional proceedings, I would say, okay, I'm not worried about this. So I am worried about it. And they quote Andrew Jackson, who famously told the press, "Where's the Supreme Court's military?" When the press was, or when the courts were striking down decisions he was making that went beyond the law. It is a constitutional crisis if the Supreme Court comes out and says, no, the president does not have this authority, and Donald Trump and Elon Musk and JD Vance say, fuck you, you don't have a military, make me. Then what happens? Because John Roberts does not have a military. The Congress does not have a military. The president does. That's no longer run by a qualified person like General Mattis. It's now run by a Fox News drunken stooge. So,
or a decorated military veteran who loves the troops and is going to do a great
he was
job
kicked
at
out
rebuilding
because-
the military.
because of his fascist tattoos, the fact that he's a drunk, that he
All
leads
right.
organizations in the ground. So, yes, I do not trust that Pete Hegseth will look to the Constitution or the country. He will look to Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth. That is my opinion. You might think his time on Fox News Saturdays and running a right-wing vets organization into bankruptcy and paying off women for sexual assault qualifies him to be Secretary of Defense. I don't. So that's part of my grievances. Only
Okay.
2 more.
2 more.
All this just general hate Washington stuff is such a fraud, right? We always laugh about it here because there's 2 things here. There's the District of Columbia, which is where people like me live. We live here. There are people that are from here. There are people that have moved here. I've lived here for 20 years. I don't live in Washington. I live in the District of Columbia. It's a wonderful town it's very vibrant, great food, great restaurants, great shopping, great homes, beautiful architecture. Do we have problems? Of course we have problems. But it's a wonderful place. And then there's Washington. And Washington is the official federal government Washington that everyone's from somewhere else and then we're elected from places like Oklahoma and Ohio and West Virginia. And you guys send your best and brightest here to make decisions for the rest of us, and we don't have a voice. But all these people claim and how much they hate Washington, but you got to laugh at this. Give me this. For all these people that hate Washington so much, boy, they spend a lot of money and time trying to get here. And then once they're here, boy, they spend a lot of money and time trying to fucking stay here. And for people who hate the government so much, oh boy, do they love coming here and the trappings of the government and staying here for 25, 30 years, regardless of party. And so I always laugh when I see these, we talk about those elites in Washington, and I'll call him the yokel dokel member of Congress who comes up here and he gets off his plane at Reagan Airport and he takes his cab or his staffer drives him up to the Hill and he shakes his fist at the Capitol and he votes no all week or now votes yes all week. And then he gets back in the cab and goes home to Oklahoma and he tells the locals tales of how he shook his fist at the Capitol and what he's doing to destroy the government and defund it. All the while, wearing his cute little member pin, his member of Congress driver's license plate, and campaigning to come back for more and more and more. And then they come to Washington and they yuck it up with people like me. They're belly up to the bar, drinking hot top shelf liquor. They're going to the sporting events. They're playing RTJ and congressional, and then going home and saying, oh, I'm really letting that Washington, D.C. know it. Fuck you. No, you're not. You're a joke. All right. So that's two. And then my final argument is, no, I think that's,
That's it. You're good. Oh, wait.
one more,
Better make it a good one here.
Oh, it's a good one. The day after the inauguration at the church service, a bishop at the National Cathedral asked Donald Trump to show mercy for all the people who are afraid of him, whether they be transgender, whether they be undocumented immigrants, whether they just be people who disagree with him and fear him. And the camera zooms in on Trump and Vance, and they're rolling their eyes, and they're saying, look at this liberal woman up here preaching politics from the pews, as if she doesn't have a right to free speech, both through freedom of religion, as if she doesn't have religious liberty, as if she doesn't have a First Amendment right to free speech. And so I know your response. Your response is, she's using politics from the pulpit, as if pastors across the country in evangelical churches and black churches don't do the same thing. But what was she asking? Will you please show mercy on those who are afraid of you, those who disagree with you, those who are in pain? Mercy is a tenet of Jesus and of Christianity. Mercy. We have a divided country, and he needs to be the president for the whole country. Your family, mine, red states, blue states. Most of Joe Biden's funding went to red states in the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act. Billions to Ohio. Elon Musk got a ton of money in Nevada. Joe Biden never said, I'm not going to hold disaster relief money to red states unless you enact DEI policies or hire only trans people. So simply asking for mercy, what's unchristian about that? Other than maybe it embarrassed the president? Maybe
I mean, what I have an answer to that. I really do. I think it was very unchristian, actually. Her entire, I'm not even gonna call it a sermon, her talk, I thought was very unchristian in a lot of ways. And I'll get to that. So why don't I just start by saying, like, so Jordan is saying that, Jordan, you want Rob to say something nice about Trump and you want me to say something I disagree about. The thing I disagree with President Trump is appointing Paula White to the faith office. I think this woman's a heretic. I don't believe that she's a Christian pastor. I don't believe that she preaches the gospel of Jesus Christ, period. And I think she's a bad influence anywhere she goes and anything she does. And I hope that President Trump doesn't listen to her and take real advice from her. I really do. And he does surround himself with some good people from Christian churches. She's not one of them. I think she's a charlatan. I also think this woman that was giving the bishop, the Episcopalian bishop, was also a charlatan. This is not the Christian gospel. You don't get up and read from the Quran if you are preaching the Christian gospel. My faith's very important to me, Rob, and like I want to explain my faith. My faith finds its foundation in the fact that I'm a sinner and not worthy of eternal life.
It's not
That's my faith. My faith is I'm a sinner.
It's not
And-
your
and-
faith.
Well, it's what
I'm a Christian.
right. I'm telling you what I believe that the Bible states on this is that all men have fallen short of the glory of God, every single person, and that we are in need of a savior. And I believe Jesus is my savior, but I also believe that there's wrath for my sin, but mercy through the finished work of Jesus Christ. And when pastors, I don't care if they're conservative, if they're liberal, I don't care who they are, when they get up and they speak a different message other than that, then that's not Christianity. And here's the deal. We didn't elect Donald Trump to be a pastor. The government bears a sword. The Bible talks about this. The government bears a sword to try to keep us safe. I don't want President Trump showing mercy to illegal immigrants who are criminals who are here. I want him to get them out of our country and to keep us safe. So that to me was just an opportunity for a far left liberal activist to get up from the pulpit and have this high and mighty, I'm going to lecture the president of the United States. It is what it is. He rolled his eyes at it. We moved on. I don't feel like we need to give it a whole lot of thought.
I didn't move on for a couple of reasons. One, comparing her to Paula is just asinine. I mean, Paula is scamming people out of tens of thousands of dollars. Give $35,000 and you'll get close
I'm not saying, I get what you're
speaks
saying
in
on that.
tongues. Like,
Right.
look, here's the deal. A couple of shows ago, you mentioned the homosexual agenda. And I found the terminology, and I've always found the terminology offensive, because even if you just take our show, for example, on the shows I'm not on, typically you'll have on a pastor or somebody of faith, and you do advance your views on Christianity. And I'm fine with that because I know it's important to you, and I know you believe what you believe. And part of being an evangelical is to evangelize, to spread it.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never see me on this podcast or the homosexual agenda try to convert people to be gay. If I could do that, I would have converted Leonardo DiCaprio 20 years ago. It's not something that we can convert, right? Even if there are a few we would like to have on our team. Our agenda is to be able to work without getting fired for who we are, be able to get married, be able to have families, be able to live without threat of violence. But where the evangelical movement comes in politically, and I say this as a Christian, although not an evangelical, is that it's at odds with the First Amendment in the Constitution. Why? Because the First Amendment to the Constitution grants all of us religious liberty. Our religious liberty extends from our mouths and our hands and our doorsteps only until the guy across the street, until I'm telling him what to do, or I'm enforcing the wrath of God, or I'm doing something that abridges his rights and freedoms. And the government, our founders, a lot of them were Christians, many were deists. Jefferson didn't believe in the Immaculate Conception,
Right.
or the resurrection. But they didn't want an organized state religion. They wanted people to be able to worship whoever they want or nothing at all. And I studied theology for several years at Georgetown. It's a Catholic Jesuit university. And there are many things in Catholic teachings and doctrine that I disagree with, obviously. But I respect it. And one of the things that I found through that process was that when you compare the religions, Jesus has a role in many other major religions. In other religions, he's a prophet. There are similarities in most of the religions. So when he said reading from the Quran, there are aspects in the Quran that are very similar to our Bible, the Christian Bible. And there are obviously very big differences. I think that her message is a positive one, meaning that she's in the national cathedral. It is not an evangelical church. It is not an Islamic church.
That's an Episcopalian church, actually.
Yeah, but she, at the bully pulpit, we give all of our pastors the right. And so the problem right now, when we let God get into politics and we let Jesus get into politics, people twist
I agree 100%.
what they want to fit their narrative. And so
I agree.
I think what type of person you are is what you bring to religion. If you're a violent person, you'll find plenty of things in there to justify violence. If you're a loving, compassionate, giving person, there's plenty in the Bible to support that. But what's happened is that a lot of Trump supporters, they'll tell you in interviews, they'll tell you in the polls, they think he is a message from Jesus, the sign from God. Politics has become their new religion. A lot of the message of Jesus Christ has become inconvenient in MAGA world. Helping the poor, washing the feet of the poor, feeding the hungry, helping the homeless. You're my brother's keeper. We were all strangers once. Love thy neighbor as I'd love myself. It is not our job as individuals to inflict the punishment on what we perceive to be violations of God. That's God's job.
I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said. I really do. And if you go back, and I'll go and plug the 9 Holes, 9 Questions I did with Presbyterian pastor Jeremy Ferry, who is my pastor.
And I enjoyed it.
We talked about this. Like, we are both theologically exclusionary. How do I want to say this? We exclusively believe that our faith is the only way. However, as a society, we're pluralistic in the sense of we believe in the First Amendment. I believe in everything you just said. My biggest problem with Paula White being there in this brand of Christianity is that they really do believe that that Donald Trump is God's chosen. Now, I believe God is sovereign over all things and nothing happens outside of his perfect will and that he's in control of the universe. However, I am not somebody that's going to hold Donald Trump up as this prophetic pastor. I believe he's in a position to do a job in government. I have a real problem when people wear their faith on their sleeve and use it as a political weapon because it cheapens the sacredness of what I believe. And I have those disagreements with people in my own party all the time. Because it's big in Republican politics, obviously.
This is one lesson I learned from somebody much smarter than me. It's that we only get really angry and fight with each other over issues we cannot prove. So when we talk about our faith, we believe it, we want it to be true, maybe it is true, but we can't prove it. And so for hundreds of years, thousands of years, we've fought over, even amongst Christians, over varying sects within the Christian faith, the Christian community, over what things mean and how they ought to be and this, that, or the other. We never fight or lose our shit or cry or scream or slam things down when it's something we know is true. Like you said 2 + 2 is 5. I'm not going to lose my shit because I know it's 4 and I can prove it, right? So when we talk about faith, the key component of it, one of the key components, is a certain level of doubt. So in order to be a Christian, part of that is to deny all other gods before our own. Well, if we're denying all other gods and saying those are all fake and bullshit, but ours is real, two things are true. One is we're only denying one God away from being an atheist. And two, all the other 6 billion people who aren't Christians, who are Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, or nothing at all, are going to hell for not accepting Jesus as their Lord and Savior. So where I struggle, admittedly, and where I have doubts is that I believe in Jesus, the lessons of Jesus. I believe in God. I want there to be more to life than just being put in a wooden box and eaten by worms when it's our time to go. But I struggle to believe that 6 billion other people on earth are going to go to hell because they didn't worship God, or in the scariest of senses, idolatry of endorsing a false prophet or endorsing a political person. So that's my first big doubt I wrestle with faith. And my second is that I have seen horrible, horrible pain. I've lived through it. I've seen kids with cancer. I've had it. I've seen people go through plane crashes and floods and fires and hurricanes and all these horrible things. And so it leads me to believe that God cannot be both all powerful and all loving. It makes me doubt it, because if he was all powerful, he would be able to stop these things. And if he was all loving, he wouldn't let a kid be ravaged with giant blood, horrible diseases. And I know the response to that is probably, well, he sends messages to make us tougher. Can't you send a better message? And closing on Donald Trump, he may be setting a lesson for us, but can't you do it a little better? Can't you be a little more decent, a little more kind, a little more savvy, a little more like Jesus?
Well, I want to first just say, I didn't expect the show to go in this direction for our closing, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being vulnerable and saying these things and talking through doubts. And look, I had the same doubts. I my biggest I pastored a church for a couple years when I was out of politics. I got around a lot of church leaders around the whole country, and I got a lot of issues with a lot of people within the church. Um, and I figured out a long time ago that I don't have all the answers. I've staked my life on believing in Jesus, and that's important to me. And I know how sinful I am, and I know the crazy things that I do. And so it's the thing that gives me peace. And I believe there's a lot of evidence for it. But for me to be angry about it and when trying to convert others is insane. I've come to learn a long time ago, it's not my job to convert anybody. It's my job to speak and tell my testimony and tell what I believe, and tell how Jesus has touched my heart. But it's not up to me. I can't convince somebody of this argument. Yeah, I believe God supernaturally does that with people. And so I never want to come across as angry. I never really, and that's one of the things I do concern myself with in Republican politics, is that we have blurred the line between the secular and the sacred. And we've tried to use this sacred thing to win elections, and frankly, it does nothing to advance the church. It actually hurts the church. And I think that's why you've seen declining church attendance through the years, because we've had people that have used it and abused it, and people see through that. So I do appreciate you bringing that stuff up. There's doubts that I have too. I don't have all the answers.
Well, you're way more decent. You're way more decent and thoughtful than our president.
Well, and honestly, and I hope that the president surrounds himself with people that have genuine faith, that can share that with him. And I don't know the condition of his true heart and true soul and what he really believes. I didn't vote for him because he was or wasn't a Christian. But I do hope that he surrounds himself with people better than Paula White. You know, I think you and I can agree that she's a charlatan and not the right person to lead the faith office of the White House. But other than that, I think he's doing a great job. And I'm with the 53% that think he's doing a great job. And I approve of what he's doing.
47 according to some polls.
So, yeah, well, regardless, I'm with half the country that thinks he's doing a really good job. How about that?
I'm with half that are ready for it to be done. I have to say something nice. Do I have to say something nice? I said something nice.
Oh, yeah, you do. You do. I said something bad. You have to say something nice.
The general thing, I think it's a good thing for new leaders to shake things up and have a disruptive posture. I think we've outlined that he has that. I disagree with how he's doing it. One thing I support is the executive order banning paper straws. I'm really digging deep here. Look, I worry about global warming. I think it's real. I think humans contribute to it. I don't think plastic straws are the root cause of the earth incinerating and oceans rising and making Florida, a smaller island than it currently is. I also hate paper straws functionally and biodegradable silverware like you'd see in the house cafeteria. It's one area where I give Republicans credit. Environmentalists serve a purpose. We need people looking out and reminding us. However, they're a pain in the ass, and they generally do things that make us, annoyed. And this is one of those things that annoyed. So if I were elected in 2028, I can't believe 2028 is a thing. That's one executive order I would not reverse on my first day.
Because after all, according to Trump, if some of those plastic straws end up in the ocean, it's not going to affect the sharks as they're chomping their way through the ocean. That's what it said.
I mean, it goes along with nuking hurricanes and expanding the line on the with a Sharpie on the hurricane in Florida. But that's one area.
Hey, I'll tell you this. I'm glad he's back for nothing else. I had a meeting the other day and I was late for the meeting. I was in my bedroom with my wife and I was like, babe, I got to go. And she had Fox News on and Trump is sitting in the Oval Office doing a press gaggle. And I couldn't take my eyes off it. I mean, the guy he's got a command of television like no other president has had. And you got to say, I mean, he provides some entertaining value at times when he's answering questions. And he's not afraid to rumble with these reporters.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's got big balls. He's got big balls and tiny brains, which is usually what you hear, like right before someone says, "Hold my beer," and blows off their hand with fireworks. I'll give him that. The guy's got some stones. It takes some brass to say what he says on a daily basis and to just not give a shit. It also helps to be a billionaire and have an absolutely bulletproof support from his fans. We'll say fans instead of voters. But I unfortunately have to get going.
I too. We went a little long, but this is, ladies and gentlemen, our first segment of Rob airing of grievances. We'll try to do this occasionally. And Rob, I appreciate you. And even though we disagree on a lot, I appreciate you as a friend and appreciate our differences. And I appreciate everybody that's listening and watching our show. Please subscribe. It helps us if you go to subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, subscribe on Spotify, and follow us on all the different social media channels that we have listed here. Rob, have an awesome day, brother.
You too. Hey.